This video contains full spoilers for all of Deltarune chapters 1 to 5. Watch at your own risk. Not too long ago, Toby Fox once again blew me away with another masterfully crafted Deltarune chapter. The festival section was so fun. The lake scene genuinely made me so happy seeing the relationship between Noelle and Susie I've been rooting for like 5 years finally blossom. And the Dark World was just non-stop bangers, with the fun side-scrolling sections, peak music, and the flowers who seem to have been made knowing the exact formula for making a fan-favorite character. Some look at this chapter a little unfavorably, with the lack of major lore hints and theory bait, but I've found it to be my favorite chapter so far. Probably. It might just be the recency bias talking, but I do believe it to be the most fun, which will probably be the consensus once the whole game is released and we do new playthroughs knowing the whole story, instead of trying to pick up on threads of lore. But all of that is only seen in the normal route. Deltarune infamously has another way to play through the story in a much darker way. The weird route. This route has you corrupt Noelle and make her stronger, in what seems to be an attempt to break the boundaries of the game. While the weird route had no huge impact on the gameplay of other chapters, while of course it does skip a lot of chapter 2, the effects on chapter 3 and 4 are much more minimal, with 2 extra pieces of dialogue in chapter 3, and the light world section of chapter 4 playing out differently without too much deviation, and the dark world section having a similar difference amount to chapter 3. With this being the case, I was expecting chapter 5 to have a similar level of deviation, where the festival will play out differently before going to a largely identical dark world, but our old pal Tricky Tony couldn't resist a big surprise. Most of the festival scene is skipped, with Susie only bringing you through the empty stalls in the evening. The only requirement of this section is talking to Sans at his ice cream stand, where Susie draws herself, Chris, and Ralsei on the punch card. He then gives you bread that drops a lot of crumbs. While Susie is waiting on the ice cream order, Chris and Noelle talk at the lake, where Noelle talks about how she just wants to break free of just being Noelle, like how Chris broke free of just being Chris. She says she wants to do something crazy, like sprout wings and fly off somewhere nobody else ever was, like the other side of the lake, saying she can do it if we tell her to. She takes Chris's hands, and we tell her to proceed. She walks into the lake, bringing Chris with her. We tell her to proceed again, and again and again, as the two go in deeper and deeper into the lake. After a few choices, the option to back out disappears, having only 2 options: proceed and proceed. After a while, the screen starts to fade, as the water is reaching their heads, but every instruction to proceed ebbs the screen fade away, like it's keeping Chris and Noelle conscious. Eventually their heads go below the water level, but they still push on, as the player spams the proceed command. The text box starts turning red, reminiscent of what happens in Earthbound when a party member is knocked out, and the white screen fade is obscuring just about everything. Eventually the whole screen goes white and doesn't fade when you choose to proceed, before quickly cutting to a view of a CRT monitor saying, "Insert Chapter 7, Side B," as a kind of reference to games like Final Fantasy VII, where, at certain points, it requires you to switch to another disc, really reinforcing the theme of criticism of RPG progression and getting stronger in the weird route, unfortunately without any cool art to go with it. This is a very different chain of events to previous chapters' weird routes, and it gives us the interesting revelation of chapter 6 being completely skipped here, along with most of chapter 5. This debunks the theories that were floating around after chapter 4 that the weird route was the prophecy, as chapter 6 exists in the prophecy and chapter 7 doesn't, as was explained to us in the Hammer of Justice fight. Unless maybe chapter 6 is the one that isn't meant to exist and chapter 7 is the one chapter left. It would definitely be interesting for that to be the case, but the events of the chapter 5 weird route can't really be described as a field of pink and gold. We don't really see Ralsei or Flowery's Inferno of Jealousy, or anyone else for that matter. So the weird root doesn't line up with the Lord of the Hammer / the prophecy, so saying the weird root is the prophecy really is just staying on a sinking ship. But going back to the whole skipping chapter 6 thing, we see at the end of the normal route of chapter 5 that Noelle is going to be very important in chapter 6, as Susie says that she and Chris have to include Noelle in their Dark World shenanigans, and everyone in Castletown is preparing for her arrival. So it makes sense why chapter 6 can't happen in the weird route, because of how Noelle is. But you're not just skipping to chapter 7, you're skipping to chapter 7 side B. The game doesn't save after you complete the chapter 5 weird route, which suggests that we will have to play through it again when chapter 7 comes out, properly skipping chapter 6, which will likely greatly affect the events of chapter 7, hence the weird route version of it being called side B. The stuff that happens in the weird route suggests that Chris and Noelle are in some way going out of bounds, escaping the experiment Gaster is running to facilitate the survey program, and when the game starts to fade away, the red text box goes back to white, and Noelle's dialogue portrait no longer appears to be underwater. Anyway, before I get too deep into theory territory, what does this mean? Well, this suggests that chapter 7 likely takes place outside of the limits of the game, which definitely makes sense. As I said before, the prophecy ends at chapter 6. Chapter 7 definitely exists in the normal route, as there would be no side B if there wasn't a side A. Gaster, or to be politically correct, the mysterious voice from the Goner Maker, has a few lines at the end of chapter 4 saying we've reached the halfway point and calls the game his Deltarune. The first prophecy panel in chapter 4 says, "The legend of this world, Deltarune," which suggests that whatever the actions the player carries out in the survey program is the new prophecy of the world. For the less initiated, when chapter 1 originally released, the exe file was called survey_program.exe, suggesting that the game is a simulation used for some kind of experiment. This is complemented by the Goner Maker sequence at the start of chapter 1, having a lot of survey/experiment-like language, as well as in the tweets from the official Undertale/Deltarune Twitter account. This suggests that the bounds of Deltarune are set by Gaster to facilitate his survey, and escaping it in the weird route goes against his wishes, but that's not really the case. If you would, look at the PlayStation version of Deltarune. This has achievements, which also seem to be set by Gaster based on the language used in the names and descriptions, such as saying, "complete without issue" when you finish a chapter, whether or not you did the weird route. Granted, chapter 5 doesn't have any achievements as of the time of writing, but the weird route isn't a problem up to that point at least, but I guess we won't really know for sure whether chapter 5 is too much of a deviation until... I don't know really. But enough speculation. You'll just have to wait for my theory video on how the boundaries of the game work. Now for the actual purpose of this video, what does this all mean for the future chapters? Well, we have confirmation that chapter 7 exists in both routes, seeing as the weird route gets us to insert chapter 7 side B, and the existence of side B implies the existence of side A, so we won't be submitting to the prophecy either way. This makes the weird route a much darker way of subverting the prophecy, instead of submitting to it like previously theorized. We don't have any particularly solid evidence of anything chapter 6, other than the fact that Noelle is going to be important, and that it doesn't exist in the weird route. Two pieces of information that kind of cancel each other out. But we do know that something pretty huge is going to happen, as we will have to subvert the prophecy to be able to go into chapter 7 side A. Speaking of which, where will chapter 7 take place? Well, the weird route suggests that we are going out of bounds, which makes sense considering how it's outside of the prophecy. But the graphic for chapter 7 always existed, so Gaster foresaw it happening, even if it goes against the prophecy. It's his Deltarune. So, is Gaster dynamically creating the survey program to account for the decisions made by the player? Kind of making him an in-universe insert of Toby Fox? Maybe, but that's the easy explanation. My explanation doesn't matter. The who, why, and when don't matter. What matters is the what and the where. Portal Bump has a video about the connections between the Chapter 5 Weird Route and a certain out-of-bounds glitch from Earthbound Beginnings, by starting a trail of breadcrumbs using the bread item from a certain character's inventory, having the character leave your party, taking the crumbs back, and following them to their source. This leads you to a monochrome world outside of the game's bounds, made of garbage data. Sound familiar? The fact that the bread Sans gives us at his ice cream stand in the Weird Route is specified to be crumbling easily is strange, and Toby Fox wouldn't give us bread at all if it wasn't important. And Toby loves his good Earthbound series references, as seen at the start of the Gunner Maker music sampling Gygus' theme from Earthbound. Spamton's battle themes using the WOW sound effect from Earthbound. And I could go on. My point here is that the bread is very likely a reference to the breadcrumb glitch, which alludes to Chris and Noelle going out of the game's bounds from Chapter 7 Side B. Real quick, it's also very important to note how Noelle has a particular skill for breaking games, to the point where the Spamton Sweepstakes has a blog post from her, where she talks about video game glitches. We see how she got a super weird pet in Cat Petters 2, which broke the game or whatever. It's been pointed out by many before me, but Noelle breaking games parallels how she's breaking the video game that we are playing, Deltarune. So where are Chris and Noelle actually going? Well, nowhere, maybe. The same nowhere we get the ticket to in Chapter 3's egg sequence. When looking out of the binoculars in Man Country, you can see a view which is just the glitch area from the breadcrumb glitch. The Eggman is seemingly connected to something traumatic from Chris's past, or just their past in general. And Noelle talks about how when she, Chris, Azriel, and Des were kids, they wanted to see what was on the other side of the lake. So a ghost of Chris's past is rearing its head twice, once in a memory and once in the Weird Route, both calling back to the breadcrumb glitch in Earthbound Beginnings. They are going out of bounds. This means that Chapter 7 Side B will be outside of the survey program's limits. But what about Side A? Deltarune Chapter 6 will lead into the seams of the game starting to split, maybe coming from the shelter, or maybe from trying to stop the prophecy's tragedy a la Across the Spider-Verse. In Chapter 7 Side A, we'll follow the Fun Gang trying to save everyone in the worldwide roaring, ending in Susie making a light fountain with the white pen of hope, letting everyone and the story live on. Chapter 7 Side B will start in the same void as Side A, but without the world shattering, and something will happen leading to the one way that the story actually ends. Or something like that. I went a little off the rails there. There's a good chance that the bones of that will happen, as it makes sense for Chapter 7 to be outside of the limits, because even in larger deviations, the chapters have always had the same setting whether or not you do the Weird Route. But going off the precedent from previous Weird Route chapters is a dangerous hill to climb, considering how different Chapter 5 was. But for its short runtime, it did take place in the same place as the start of Chapter 5's normal route. You just skip most of it. Chapter 7 Side A will likely take place out of bounds, with Chapter 6 leading into how the Fun Gang got there. But that's all I really have to say about the Weird Route and theories I have for how the future chapters will play out. I may put out a video on the limits of Deltarune when I dive deeper into some of the points I made here, like at some point in the future. But I do have another theory I'm working on about Deltarune's parallels with Mother 3. Yes, more Earthbound series references. and how that might give an idea on how the rest of the story is going to play out, mostly in areas not covered in this video. I'll try to get it out by next week, but we'll see. So look forward to that, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, why not leave a like, and enjoy the next 24 hours.